Welcome to Unit 13 Antivirus 1984 mini lessons. These are going to be the last of the mini lessons for this version of Scratchzilla, and then we're going to start moving into some more advanced projects. Okay, so our first mini lesson, mini lesson 13.1, projectiles. We're going to show you how to create a simple shooting function for Scratch. Nothing super complicated, and just so you know, some of you, when you see this program, you might think, hey, I've seen more efficient ways of creating projectiles inside of Scratch, and that's probably true. And if I was to be teaching somebody at a higher level programming, well, first off, I probably wouldn't be using Scratch, but if I was teaching a more advanced person with projectiles, that is true, but for now, this is a great way to learn. So let's see what the program does. Okay, so we're going to have our apple moving across the screen. We have our helicopter, and we're just kind of rotating it. When we press the space bar, we will shoot arrows at the moving object. Okay, and you could kind of make this a game here, and you could put a variable up on the scene whenever it hits the apple, and okay, you can see that we can actually shoot our projectiles pretty quickly. Okay, what you're seeing is 4 different sprites are getting pushed out of this sprite, and they're just repeating themselves over and over again. Okay, and then the apple's just bouncing back and forth. Okay, so there's multiple steps taking place here. Let's look at the stage first. So nothing on the stage. The helicopter. Okay, we just turn it left and right with this simple function right here. And then in a separate function, whenever the space key is being listened to and pressed, we play a laser sound, which you can't hear because I turned off the audio on my computer because it's, I don't know, I guess I have some sort of aversion where I can't listen to sound and talk at the same time. So what we're doing is we're checking the condition of the the variable called fire from the sprite called number zero. I almost started speaking Spanish, which I can speak Spanish just for the record. Okay, so the fire variable from number 0, almost said numero 0, okay, we're testing to see if this is true. If this is true, it equals 1, then we'll broadcast a message called fire number 0. And whenever fire number 0 is sent out, guess which sprite receives it? The one called number 0. And when it receives number 0, we test to see if fire equals 1. We're making sure that that still equals 1. And if it's true, which it should, because we checked that condition right here, but you'd be shocked, sometimes weird things happen. We set fire to 0, so that way if this person playing the game is over here hammering down the space bar, this sprite basically can only be set once. Okay, because if you send a broadcast message multiple times, it'll keep resetting the sprite over and over again. So we have to set this to 0 immediately, so that way this condition will be false and the user can't keep sending this broadcast message. Because if the broadcast message keeps getting sent back to this sprite right here in this function, it's going to keep resetting itself, and we don't want that, because we want the sprite to fire and go all the way across the screen and then come back and be reused. Okay, so we tell it to go to the helicopter C, or that one right there, just the helicopter. We tell it to point in the same direction as the helicopter. We're able to get this global variable with this sensing block right here. And then we tell it to show. Then we tell it to repeat of moving to the edge, repeat moving to the edge, or until it's touching the apple. So that way it goes clear across the screen. If it gets to the end, that's just as good. Then we stop this action. We wait just a little bit, 1/100th of a second, then we hide, then we set the fire back to 1, which allows the user back here on this function, who's anxiously pressing the space bar, to allow the sprite to keep firing over and over again. Now in the situation where we press the space bar and number 0 sprite fire is no longer 1, it's been set to 0 because of this function right here. If it's set to 0, okay, that means this isn't true, so we're going to go to the nested section of this if-else statement. We'll say, okay, this is false. Let's come down here and check this. And then right inside here, we'll check to see if fire for number 1 is true. If that's true, then we broadcast the message, goes to the same type of function for this particular sprite and does the same thing of moving across the screen. If this is false, then we go to another nested if-else block and we test to see if the number 2 sprite has its fire set to 1. If that's true, it does, then we send the message there. And if that's not true, then we default down here to number 3 and we shoot number 3. And then we wait 0.1 seconds to keep the user under control. This helps slow down the function a little bit so we can actually see some things taking place on the screen and we don't broadcast messages to the sprites which cause them to reset in the middle of the action. You'll know if a sprite's getting reset in the middle of the action if the projectile moves and then suddenly disappears and it keeps coming back over and over again. Alright, let's jump into the presentation quickly. Alright, first thing, projectile. What is a projectile? It's an object that's acted upon by some force that causes it to move with a certain amount of velocity. Our projectiles happen to be arrows, and when we get to the antivirus game, we'll have a little bit fancier projectiles. Think of a projectile as anything you could throw, such as a ball, particularly softballs, baseballs, footballs, basketballs, I guess golf balls if you want to throw a golf ball. And as the object flies through the air, it slowly gets pulled back down to Earth through the gravitational pull of the Earth. Okay, our projectiles don't have to worry about that because they're all make-believe inside programming. And whenever we have our projectile script right here, we kind of follow a pattern here. We're going to show it, tell it to go to XY coordinate, point in a direction, then repeat a particular action, which is moving 20 steps until it's touching the edge or touching another sprite. That's going to be kind of our formula here for our projectiles. Okay, and you can pause the video to go through and see some of the details on this. Next, these projectiles are reusable. Okay, we keep reusing the same ones over and over again. This just helps our program become a little bit more efficient. You'll notice whenever you start cloning sprites for projectiles, you run into a situation where the computer actually could slow down or get locked up if you have too many clones taking place. Okay, so there's some advantages to using this type of system where there's a set number of sprites being used for the projectiles that keep getting used over and over again. When we teach more advanced stuff, we get into something called object pooling. And this concept could fall into object pooling, but for right now, let's just stick with the basics. Okay, so we reuse the sprite by resetting it, having to go back to a central location, and then getting, reinstantiated on the screen and moving out and having a good time. Okay, now to make our sprites do this, we have to get a lot of information from other sprites, and we use this item called a variable sensor. Again, you might want to pause the video to go through and check this out. But the variable sensor is capable of going and getting other local variable information from other sprites. Okay. Now we said local variables are created and can be used only by other sprites. That was only partially true. We can use the data from local variables of other sprites. We just can't change it. And what you'll see on this with the variable sensor is that the right-hand side of the variable sensor will give the sprite name or the stage. You select that, and then on the left-hand side, for whichever sprite or stage you pick, it'll give you a list of all the different variables for that particular sprite or stage. If you don't see the variable you're looking for on the variable sensor, you might want to go back and double check which sprite that you are trying to access. Because I've seen a lot of people make mistakes where they have the wrong sprite, which is why they can't find the right variable. And this one does not access your global variables, because global variables are already available to you. You can always go and get those. One thing to check on or to look at here is we can get the XY coordinates, the size, the volume, the direction, and volume. It's talking about like volume as its sound, not the actual volume of space that an object takes up. We can get its direction, we can get its size, and some other local information from each of these different sprites. Oh, and the costume number. Okay, the costume number could be important. Okay, so there's tons and tons and tons of uses for these. It's actually pretty cool that they're so readily available. If you were to try to do this in Java or C# to get that information, it would be a lot more work than just pulling in this cute little elliptical block here and using the drop-down menu. There would be multiple lines of programming. Okay, so it's projectile code overview. I'm going to verbally walk you through the code and not just read the slide. I'll let you pause the video and do that. But what happens is when the space key is pressed, we'll shoot the laser sounds. Next, we go into these nested if-else blocks like I was telling you earlier, and we check to see if this is true. Number 0, its variable fire is equal to 1. If that's true, then we send that message, which you saw in the projectile sprite. It receives it, then it moves across the screen, and then the nested if-else sections just follow suit by doing the same thing of checking those variables. This last one, we don't have to worry about that, because if we've gone through the code and made it all the way down to the last one, that means this one's probably already ready to fire because these have all been exhausted. So we'll go ahead and send this one. We don't need to worry about if its number is equal to 1. Okay, and these, by the point, most likely you'd have to press really fast to get all the way down to this particular message, just based on the speeds I'm using in my program, in order for these not to be true at some point in time before it actually works its way down to here. Now yours might be different, and you might exhaust all your projectiles and actually have to wait for them to reset. So just keep that in mind. Your timing and speed, which can be controlled right down here also, will help control what happens in the program. And let's see, turning on and off the projectile, we can turn it on by first setting the variable, whoa, that's not what I want to do, by setting fire to 1. By setting it to 1, that's basically turning it on. And if this is true, it's equal to 1, that means it's on. We immediately turn it to 0, that it's off, that it can't be accessed anymore through this broadcast message. And again, like I keep forgetting about that. And like I was telling you right here, this message, if it keeps getting received from the user that's hammering down the space bar because they just can't get enough projectiles on the screen to, have a good time. If they keep doing it and the message keeps getting resent, it's going to reset the variable, and this sprite may make it all the way through the code right down here, and it may start moving across the screen, but if the message gets sent back, it's going to reset everything. Okay, so that wraps it up for this unit, and again, you won't do much with the stage, but you'll program out the rest of these sprites right here. I guess we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.